Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. And here we have a very interesting article from Mike Dano's from Light Reading. Mike Dano, great article. I'll leave it in the description down below so you guys can check it out. So as you can see by the title, cable may miss America's next big 5G spectrum auction. Now, many of you may say, another big auction? Didn't we just have C-band? So yes, there is another spectrum auction up and coming. I don't know if it's necessarily a big one. C-band was I think the biggest one that we'll see in terms of contiguous spectrum chunks that are of that size, like one channel of 160 megahertz. That auction in terms of mid-band is going to be one of the biggest that we likely will see this decade. But nonetheless, auction 110 is going to take place in October, and that'll be another 100 megahertz up for grabs, total spectrum within the 406 PEAs. Now the carriers have the ability to get a max of 40 megahertz of that spectrum in a given market, and that is broken down into 10 megahertz channels. So there are 4 of those up for grabs to equal 40 megahertz for the carriers. Now, the reason it says cable is because it looks like Comcast and Charter have not filed to participate in the bidding for this auction. So they're not even going to get any of the spectrum. They just didn't file to bid. Of course, I'm just going to read it off very briefly. AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, and Dish appear to be among the 42 different entities that are registered and interested in participating in the bidding. So Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, Dish are all set to bid for spectrum. So that's pretty much all the info that we got here. So I'll give you guys some of my predictions, what I think is going to take place. There is a quiet period, so nobody's going to comment. Of course, they can't and they won't. So we'll just have to see how the bidding goes. My prediction, AT&T gets 40 megahertz nationwide. I think they spend enough to get 40 megahertz in the top 46. In the top 406 PEAs. They need it. They need it to close that gap between its competitors. Now it is broken down into four carriers of 10 megahertz, but it's better than nothing. So that's what I predict for AT&T. I think they go for 40 megahertz nationwide. They have to almost. And then the others, it's going to be up in there. I think Verizon goes for 40 in some markets, 20 in others, maybe 10 megahertz in some smaller markets. I think that's how they approach it. They don't need 40 megahertz nationwide. They just got and spent a ton of money on C-band. So they don't need another 40 megahertz nationwide and go toe-to-toe with AT&T and spend 10, 20 billion on that. That's counterproductive for Verizon at this point. Do they need more? Yes. But I think they can strategically bid in some markets more than others at this point. The C-band, that was necessary nationwide. They needed that. But this, they can be more strategic as to how they spend. In some markets, like El Paso, just for example, they have 160 megahertz of C-band, and then they got 40 megahertz of CBRS. They may not bid here. They may not. They may have to make use of that licensing first before they get any more. And this is just, in the future, but I know in the future spectrum resources aren't unlimited, but Verizon may not bid here. They haven't even deployed the CBRS yet. So that's just coming from a strategic standpoint. And then I personally think, again, I think T-Mobile gets 20 megahertz nationwide. The reason I say 20, T-Mobile just wants to stay ahead in the spectrum race, so to speak. They want to say we have the most spectrum throughout the duration of 5G. And the only way for them to obtain that lead in that total of spectrum, they have to buy more to stay ahead. So if let's say they ended up with 0 licensing and Verizon gets 40 in some markets, 20 in others, that just closes that total spectrum gap very closely. Verizon would still be behind, but they'd be in some markets within 10 to 20 megahertz away from having the same amount of spectrum as T-Mobile. So T-Mobile, in order to create that gap still, they're going to have to buy some of the spectrum. So I think they get 20 megahertz nationwide just to maintain that lead. And then I think Dish goes for 10 in some, 20 in others, and in some of the bigger markets where they may lack spectrum overall, mid-band, I think they try for 40. Depending on their resources of money, they may get outbid by AT&T, but I think they try for 40 in some markets. I think they really do. So let me know what your predictions are. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. AT&T goes for 40. That's just, they just have to. They got the money, so they're going to do it. Verizon, they don't have to go for 40 nationwide. So I think they bid strategically, because if not, they're going to be in a bidding war against AT&T. And then again, T-Mobile 20 megahertz nationwide just to maintain their spectrum lead. And Dish, they go 10, 20, and then in some markets, I think they try to bid for 40 if they are capable with the resources. So let me know what you think about that in the comment section down below. If you have been on the channel or you're new to the channel and you have not yet liked, shared, subscribed, make sure you do so. Hit that notification bell so you are notified when I do upload content. Make sure to follow my social media outlets for more updates and interactions. Make sure to subscribe and also follow the social media outlets of the Tech Extremist. Thanks again for watching. This is Tyrone with Tech Life. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.